How did this tour come about, and how do you guys feel about heading back to Australia?
Well, I feel stoked about heading back to Australia for sure. It's always a blast to play down there. Fans are great. Just the whole vibe is a lot of fun. How it came about was pretty much like any tour. We just sort of get an email one day that's like, "Hey, this is happening. You guys want to do it?" And we just have a kind of a quick sort of text powwow and say like, "All right, yeah, let's get in there." And yeah, we usually confirm things like relatively quickly if we can all do it and we're all into it.
Yeah, you mentioned the vibe about playing in Australia. Tell us a little bit about that vibe and what you like about it so much.
Well, I feel like the Australians are just really sort of fun-loving from what I've sort of gathered, touring with different Australian bands and, everything from the slang to, I don't know, it just seems like you guys like to have a fucking good time down there. So, and I think it translates really well for metal bands, in terms of like the crowd response. It's usually really energetic and very passionate about metal from my experiences, so it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, and you're touring with Cattle Decapitation. Tell us a little bit about how you guys feel about touring with those guys, and do you know them pretty well?
Yeah, we've done several tours with them at this point, so we know Cattle very well. They're great dudes, really solid band. Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. Plus, they've got like a ripping record out, so it's cool that they're going out to support that, and we can, go out and support them.
Yeah. So I was doing my research for this interview, and I took a look through and realised that with Cryptic Warning brought into the picture as well, this is actually the 20th anniversary of Revocation. Do you see that as the 20th anniversary, or do you kind of like not include those Cryptic Warning years there?
No, I don't really include the Cryptic Warning years. I look at Revocation starting in like 2006, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so that time period must have been a great time period. The Boston live music scene is such an amazing scene. Tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in that scene, and then what it was like getting out there with bands in that scene.
It was awesome. I mean, we played with so many different bands, like in the metal realm and the punk scene. So, we'd be doing sort of club shows at small bars and clubs like O'Brien's and stuff, and kind of gradually working our way up to sort of bigger clubs like Great Scott or the Middle East, which was, a cool sort of stepping stone for us. It's like, oh, wow, I can't imagine, playing at this 200-cap venue or whatever, right? Going from like a 50-cap room to a 200-cap room was like a really big deal. And then we were also playing, basement shows and stuff like that, random warehouse gigs with like punk rock bands and stuff, or just like random like house parties. So it was cool to be a part of that scene. It seemed like all my friends were in the music scene in some way, doing shows, and on any given weekend we were all kind of bouncing around from like different shows wherever they were across the Boston scene.
Yeah. So back then, did you see music as being your full-time profession later in life, or did you think that 20 years later that you would be doing tours to Australia and things like that?
I think it was always the goal, right? Whether it was going to come to fruition or not, it's hard to tell back then. But I always thought positively. I always was focused, and I knew that the music, there was something special to that. So I figured if I just grinded it out, just kept going, and kept honing my craft, eventually people would take notice, and thankfully, yeah, it's become a career for me.
Yeah, the band has just grown and grown and grown over the years, and the Outer Ones was such an amazing album, and it's really saw that evolution. Tell us a little bit about how you've seen the evolution of the band, and what's been those things that have really stood out for you over that journey as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, when we first started out, again, it's hard to envision the trajectory that the band had taken. So I mean, we were just writing music for ourselves, right? And just to a big extent, that's still what I do, right? I mean, I have to let the music sort of speak to me first and foremost before I think about how it's going to affect anybody else. So we're not really a band that thinks about writing for a particular fan base or this or that. It's really about kind of satisfying this creative drive that we have, and I think that's important because then it comes from an honest place. And with the Outer Ones, it was really just us sort of really embracing the death metal aesthetic that's been a part of our sound since day one, but just sort of turning up the dial on it and really going head on into that death metal realm.
Yeah. How have those tracks been going live off the Outer Ones, and what can your fans expect from your shows here in Australia?
The response so far to the music, whether it's been on record or live, has been really phenomenal. So I can't wait to play these new songs live in Australia and just have the Australian crowd sort of witness the performances. The material's obviously very aggressive. It's super heavy, but it's also very progressive in parts too. There's lots of twists and turns and some surprises thrown in. So I think it's gonna be a blast playing these songs for the Australian crowds.
Yeah, you're getting to that point now in your career where you've got a great back catalogue to choose from as well. Is it getting harder these days to choose a set list when you're coming on a tour like this down under?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely difficult to, it's impossible to play everything, right? I mean, you've got 7 records at this point. Generally, what we've been doing is, with every new release, kind of primarily focusing on the new material. I kind of like that sort of playbook when bands come out and they're not just sort of rehashing songs from years and years ago, but they're actively exploring the new material live.
Yeah.
Because we're really passionate about the new material, and anytime we do a new record, I think just because it's so fresh to us, we want to play it. So we've been leaning pretty heavily on the new material to keep it fresh for us, keep it fresh for the fans, but we also will put in a few sort of crowd pleasers here and there. So I would say definitely expect some bunch of new material, but a few crowd pleasing songs thrown in the mix for good measure.
Yeah. Now, talking of new material, I've noticed that you guys kind of bring out an album every 2 years over the last few years. Are you guys already in that cycle of working on new material for a new album now?
Yeah, we're writing. There's no concrete plans to record as of yet. We're actually, with the success of the Outer Ones, we're really just kind of riding that out. We just keep getting opportunities to go on tour. So we're doing this, and then we're going to do festivals. I think we might do one more thing in the fall. So yeah, we're still very much in the Outer Ones cycle, but we've been working on new material sort of quietly in the laboratory, as it were.
Yeah. Do you find that you're someone that can write when they're on the road, or you'll get inspiration for music while you're on the road, or do you need to be at home and kind of basing yourself around writing music at that time?
It really depends. It's funny when inspiration strikes. Sometimes it's on tour. I would say I write the majority of my stuff when I'm home, but every once in a while I'll write a riff on tour. Sometimes I'll write a riff at sound check. Just the stage will sound really good, and I feel like my amp's dialed in really well, and a riff will just come out as I'm just on stage, warming up for sound check sometimes. So I like to be open to the creative influence, right? And whenever it strikes, I want to be able to sort of record it and catalog it. But yeah, I would say in general, the majority of the stuff I write is at home when I'm in sort of a more
So when you're
chill environment.
Yeah. So when you're on the road, what kind of things do you like to do when you're in a country like Australia? Do you find that you have a little bit of downtime and you like to head out and check out the cities, or what kind of things do you like to do?
Yeah, I always love to explore. I mean, I'm a big foodie, so if there's a cool restaurant or some local dish that everyone talks about, points me in the right direction to, I'll maybe check that out. I love sort of going on walks and just sort of checking out the architecture, statues, this and that in the city centers, or just visiting museums. I'm a big fan of art and art history, so if there's a really cool museum in a city that I haven't been to, sometimes I'll just go on a solo mission just to go check that out. So I definitely love to explore, and and just soak up what a city has to offer. Because you never know when the next time you're going to be there is.
Yeah. As a foodie, is there an Australian dish that you really want to try? Because we kind of see ourselves as pretty bland with the dishes that we have to offer.
Well, I mean, I think that there's a lot of great chefs in Australia. I've actually had some really incredible meals there. So with anything, we're all such global cities that have so many different influences, right? So I mean, I've had some really great Asian food in Melbourne, for example. So not necessarily maybe specific to Australia, but just sort of the melting pot that Australia is, and so many other countries, just sort of going out and exploring what the country has to offer from a culinary standpoint is always a real treat. Yeah.
Where have you found has been the best place to go out and explore food? Like, what city of the world would you recommend to foodies to go to and explore for the best food?
Oh man, that's a tough one, right? Because there's so many different, great cities out there that have such vibrant culinary scenes. I mean, I think Boston's got an amazing culinary scene. Obviously, New York, LA. There's great culinary scene in Montreal. Same thing for Toronto. Obviously, Paris, depending on where you go. Melbourne's got a great food scene from what I've experienced.
Yeah. We've got one of those really unique.
It's hard to say, because there's just so much great food out there. But I mean, honestly, I'm a little bit biased, being from Boston. But I think if you're traveling through Boston, there's a lot of great restaurants in Boston to check out for sure.
Yeah, here in Melbourne, we've got that unique kind of thing where multiculturalism has worked so well in our city that you go one block and it's the Greek block, you go to the next block, it's the Italian block, and then there's Chinatown and places like that. So you've got that unique kind of experience here in Melbourne. Did you find that?
Yeah, it's definitely unique, right? Yeah, the whole multiculturalism. It's cool, because it reminds me of a lot of American cities.
Yeah. Well, mate, I know we are fast running out of time, so I was wondering if you could tell us if there's anything you'd like to say to your fans out there before they go out and grab tickets for these shows.
Thank you for the continued support as always. I hope everything is okay there with the wildfires. I've heard that's been getting under control a little bit with the rain, but my heart goes out to you guys. It was really heartbreaking to see all that happening. So I'm happy that things are seemingly kind of dying down with those wildfires. And yeah, we can't wait to come perform for you guys and just have a blast.
Well, Dave, thank you so much for chatting to us today. Cannot wait to see you guys when you're in Melbourne. And again, thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, let me know if you got any recommendations of spots I should check out.
Definitely, yeah. Well, it depends on what kind of food you love, but my favourite restaurant in Melbourne, I love Greek food, so Stalactites is always one of my go-to restaurants.
Oh, awesome. Could you send me a message with that? I'll save it in my phone.
I will do, mate.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Thanks, mate. Have a great night.
You too, man.
All right. Bye.